They have to work, they have to manage their school. Many of them have to also think about how they're gonna pay tuition fees, $6,000, $8,000 every 5 months, 6 months, right? So they start becoming victim of depression. Now, you have written this book, but you are also a happiness expert. Please give us an advice for these young minds on how they can bring happiness in their life. Gretchen, it's easier for you to say, but I live with 4 students, 5 students, and one small space. Like it's not even a big house. So even if I try to make an organized, clean place, I can't control others. We all have a different work schedule. We all have a different uh, time zone and everything.
I will say that we tend to overestimate what we can do in a short amount of time, like an afternoon, and underestimate what we can get done if we do a little bit consistently.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Harpreet Singh. So we all know that New Year is almost here. In just a couple of weeks, 2022 is going to be here, and we all going to set some New Year resolutions. And I know that many of us going to set one resolution definitely, and that is clean our homes, right? The holiday season is coming up, Christmas, and then New Year. We all always think about, okay, I'm going to definitely get rid of this stuff. I'm definitely going to clean my basement and many things like that. And the study also shows that the clutter around you also impacts your happiness. So we're going to talk about in detail about that. And we have a special guest for that as well. She is one of the successful and popular authors. She is a New York Times best-selling author and has written many best-selling books. Her books has been sold over 3.5 million copies all over the world in 30 different languages. She is also a host of very popular podcast on happiness. Podcast name is Happier. And you know what? She has also been interviewed by Oprah. Amazing, right? She walked with Dalai Lama arm in arm. That's so amazing. That's why I said this is a special episode and we have a special guest. Please help me in welcoming Gretchen Rubin. Thank you so much coming to the show, Gretchen.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I'm so happy to have the chance to talk to you today.
It's so amazing. You have written many books, and I have one of your book here, Outer Order, Inner Calm. And in this episode, I really want to talk about this book, and there are two specific reasons for that, actually. The first reason, this book is very simple. Like, okay, I'm going to open any random page, and if I show to camera, like every page has very simple lesson, simple practical task you can do. And it's very practical and helpful, which I really love about this book. Every page has that. And the other reason is that I could only get hold of this book from my local library. All of your books are in the wait list. People are reading them, are in the wait list. Even this book, like I could only get hold of after 3 weeks. And I'm expecting second book by later at the end of the January. So thank you so much. Like it's so surprising and I'm so proud that you are making such an impact in the world, in the society. Thank you so much for that.
Well, thanks. I'm so happy to hear that people are reading my book. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. So Gretchen, like I said, you already have written many successful books before this one, right? You already made a name and fame of yourself. So may I ask, like, why you decided to write this book? Like, was there any specific message you wanted to convey, or you thought like there is a need in the world and I have to fulfill it? What was the reason?
Well, the reason was, so I had been writing about happiness and good habits for many years, and I began to notice something that surprised me, and you sort of hinted at it in your introduction. Over and over, when I talk to people about how they could be happier or have more energy or sort of more sense of possibility, over and over, people talk to me about wanting to just create outer order in their surroundings. For most people, outer order contributes to inner calm really more than you think that it should, because we can all agree that in a happy life, something like crowded shelves or a messy desk is pretty trivial. And yet over and over, people told me that when they got control over the stuff of their lives, they felt more in control of their lives generally, which is kind of irrational, but it's still helpful. And so I became really interested in what are like the quick, concrete, manageable things that even a very, very busy person can do in their ordinary routine that can help them create order. And then once they've created it, maintain it. Because we've all done the thing where like you have all your books and your papers, you get them, you spend hours, you get them all organized. And then a couple of weeks later, it's all messy again. So you want to create that order and then maintain that order, but without spending a lot of time. And so and I felt like that actually was something that made a surprisingly big difference to people's happiness. So I became very curious about exploring that subject.
That's so amazing, right? Like when we think about clutter, it doesn't seems like a big issue. Like especially when you have like work issues, work problems, or maybe home problems. There are so many things to think about before clutter. So how much it impacts your happiness in the long run? You think like, okay, like you mentioned the example of the desk. Is a messy desk in the long run gonna make you like a little bit sadder? Like how does it work?
Well, that's a great question. And I will say that there is a small number of people who truly are not bothered by clutter. I call these people clutter blind because they don't see it. And my sister, Elizabeth, who's the co-host of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast with me, is like this. Like, it just doesn't bother her the way it would bother me. And, you know, all things being equal, she would like to have it be tidy, but she really doesn't care. So for some people, I think it really doesn't matter that much. Often they have to live or work with other people and it matters to those people. So this can become a source of conflict, but for them, it's not that important. However, it does seem that for most people in varying degrees, people have sort of different levels of how much order they like to be in. It does make them happier. So like, let's say you're trying to focus on a big project.
Yep.
For many people, kind of creating order around them, first of all, it can help them focus. It's kind of like, okay, I'm in my preparation mode. I'm kind of warming up to tackling a big project. And then it's often easier to find what you're looking for. You don't have to fight your way to your desk through a bunch of like trash and dirty coffee cups. And I don't know about you, but I accumulate pens. I feel I'm looking around, all my pens are in my pen cup now, but there you go. I'm like, by the end of the day, every pen is out of the pen cup. Why I can't just use the same pen, I don't know, but just putting all the pens in the pen cup kind of creates this, brings down the visual noise, because I think sometimes it just weighs on us. It's just sort of a slight irritation where clearing that out can help us dig in. Now, sometimes people do feel like their creativity is fostered by kind of unexpected juxtapositions.
Yeah.
Or we all know those people who are like, yeah, I've got piles everywhere, but I can find exactly what I need in a flash. It would take me more time to like put it in the file drawer than to reorganize my files. So I would say it's not really like anybody else to say that it needs to look a certain way or be a certain way. It's more like cluing into where you feel most comfortable and where you do your best work, because maybe you like having the piles out. That's for you is more convenient.
Yeah.
If you can find everything, then it's fine. But maybe you're someone like me where I really like a bare desk and bare shelves and a lot of room to spread out. And so at the end of every day, I put everything back where it's supposed to be. And that to me helps me stay energetic and focused and creative.
That's so interesting. Like you said, like you prefer to have a bare desk, and I'm a little bit opposite to that. Like if I want to work on my desk, I need my laptop, my watch clock, my pens, like water, like cup, and 2 notebooks and a tablet as well, just on a small table. So it is so you would say like it's not same for everyone. Everyone has their own zone, right?
Right. And I think sometimes you hear from experts who are like, this is the best way, or this is the right way. And it's really, there is no best way or right way. It's really just what works for you. So you like to sit down with like all your things, like right at your fingertips. And that makes you feel like I'm ready for anything. Someone else might want a perfectly clear desk with like one pen and one pen, one note paper, and, or anywhere in between. And so it really is a question of like, how do I feel best? But if you live or work with other people, often your mess or your desire for order can have an effect on them. So like in people, like let's say you live with a roommate, or you're working in an open office, or you're even working like in a library where there's a lot of people around you. If you're a person who really, really values kind of simplicity and order, you may feel very distracted and drained by someone else's mess. So you might want to think about that, about, how you set up an environment, and if you're like living with someone, you might want to try to figure out rules so that you can both have the environment that you thrive in. But I think what happens is a lot of times is like, I try to convince you I'm right and you're wrong. And it's like, well, you should do what I say because I'm right and you're wrong. And then we just have conflict because neither one of us is right and neither one of us is wrong. I can say, this is how I feel comfortable. That's how you feel comfortable. How do we work out a situation that works for both of us instead of spending all our energy trying to convince each other to try a different way? Because often people just do thrive in different environments. One person says, I can't relax in a place that's messy. And another person says, I want to come home from work and relax. I don't want to spend my time like running around and like putting stuff away and like dusting. I don't care about that. Why should I spend my time like that? And again, no one's right, no one's wrong. You have to work it out. It's not always easy. But I think that changes the discussion.
Yes, I agree. Like, I agree with you. You said there's not a like right or wrong person, especially in a conflict. So I want to give an example here. Before recording, like we were talking about how majority of my audience is international students, right? And if any student is listening to you and on how clutter impacts on their happiness level, this question gonna comes up in their mind that Gretchen, is easier for you to say, but I live with 4 students, 5 students, and one small space. Like it's not even a big house. So even if I try to make an organized, clean place, I can't control others. We all have a different work schedule. We all have a different time zone and everything. So what advice you would give that particular student in that particular situation?
Well, that's exactly right. That's a very, very difficult situation for 2 reasons. One is lots of people who probably have different ideas of how things should be, and a different level of kind of conscientiousness about how good they are about maybe sticking to rules that everyone has made. And then also small space, because when you have a small space, everything just is more crowded, and that's hard. So the first thing to do is easy, but it doesn't always work that well, which is to come together as a group and try to decide like, what are our expectations for the group? I know from experience, I'm sure you've had the same thing, is sometimes you have these discussions, everyone says, yeah, sure, these are the rules, and then they just don't follow them. And then that becomes very frustrating to the people who are following them. Like, let's always hang up our coats in the closet so there aren't just like coats tossed all over the chairs and messy. And you're like, how hard is it to hang up a coat? And it's like, somebody's not doing it. And I get that that's very frustrating. So there's certain things that you can do to try to help people do a better job. One is try to make things as convenient as possible. So let's say there's somebody who's not hanging up their coat. Can you put up hooks inside your closet door? Because it's a lot easier to put a coat on a hook than on a hanger. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you make things even slightly more convenient, people are more likely to do it. Maybe you need more trash cans. Maybe people are leaving trash all over the place because they don't want to carry it to like another room. Again, you think, how much work does it take to carry like a piece of trash into the room? But if people aren't doing it, maybe another trash can help. Another thing is to give people an area where they can have everything they want. And if there's anything that is like in the public space or your space, you can just put it in their space. Sometimes, even if it's still visible, knowing that this is like somebody else's problem can help people feel like, well, at least my space is more organized. And if your corner of the room is a mess, like that's on you. Like I just am gonna like not look in that direction.
Right.
Yeah, and also, and just to be aware that people do have different tolerances. And so if somebody seems messy to you, it may not be that they're being deliberately inconsiderate, or that they're, don't care about your feelings. It's just like, to them, they just may not be as sensitive to it. And so they just don't understand like why it might be weighing you down as much as it is. But then also, back to this idea of clearing clutter, a lot of times areas are messy because there's just a lot of stuff in there. And if you take some time, and you might do this individually or as a group, to like, can we get rid of some of this stuff? Like, or maybe, okay, there's this vase here. Nobody even knows who it belongs to. Somebody got it 6 months ago. Yeah, 6 months ago, and nobody wants to give it away because we all think, oh, it belongs to someone else. But that roommate moved out last month, and the stuff is still kind of lingering. And so it can also help, because it's also, if you get rid of clutter, it's easier to put things away properly. And when it's more convenient, people are more likely to do it. It's easier to clean, because it's easier to like sweep up when there's not like piles here and there. And so that also makes it easier to clean up. And, and I think it often helps people buy less because they see, oh, I thought I needed a notebook, but now, I realized I have an extra notebook, but I had left it on this coffee table and kind of forgot about it. Oh, but here it is. So really making an effort to go through a space, and maybe you do need to do this as a group, so you kind of find those unclaimed things, or a little peer pressure to say like, hey, like you have this empty cardboard box, and you're like, oh, maybe it'll be useful to have an empty cardboard box, but nobody else really wants this, just like in the middle of our living space.
Yeah.
Either you figure out, like, flatten it out and put it under your bed, or put it in your own space, or turn it into a coffee table next to your bed, like a bedside table with a cloth over it, or let's recycle it. Because just keeping it like kicking around is just making everybody else feel like we don't have much, we want more elbow room. We want to have less visual noise, and we want to know like who's responsible for what. Because a lot of times in group spaces, things just sort of become, just kind of in the public space, and nobody feels responsible for them, so they accumulate.
Yes, definitely. And it is interesting, especially in a smaller space, you start feeling like, and for the young students, they start feeling frustrated, like, why I'm not getting enough space? Like this room is mine. Like why this stuff is here? Like it doesn't belong to me. Right. So a good communication is needed. And I also agree that everyone has their own definition of what a clean room looks like. Everyone has their own definition, right? If I say, this is my table, for you, you would say, no, I need a clean table. I need a bare table. So I definitely agree with that.
Or even something like bookshelves. Like for some people, a bookshelf like has a row of books on it, like very neat. And then some people are like, well, I'm just going to jam whatever I can onto that bookshelf and fill every space because you're telling me to clean up. Okay, I'll put it on the bookshelf. And then another person's like, that bookshelf, what's going on with that? That's not the way a bookshelf is supposed to look. So again, it's like, let's have a conversation about that, because and not just secretly feel like I'm right, you're wrong. Yeah. Because there's no right way to have a bookshelf. It's whatever you decide, but you may have to work it out with someone else if you share it.
Yes. And just now you also talked about get rid of some stuff if you don't need, like if this is belong to a student who already moved out. Yes. Or maybe you bought something, you spent some money, and after a few weeks, you don't need it. And this is very common. If we say, okay, like someone is saying to me, Harpreet, this watch clock has been sitting here for a few weeks, you don't need it. The first thought would come to my mind is that I spent some money on it. Why would I throw out? Yeah. So what would you say in those situations when emotions come inside and you spend some money, you maybe have some memories with that, how you can get, and there's no practical use of it in one side of your heart, like you don't need it at all. So how would you throw that stuff out?
Well, one thing is if you can give it away, a lot of times people find it easier to give something away than to just throw it away, especially if it still could be used by someone else.
Yes.
So maybe you can find someone else who needs it. Maybe you can find a way to free cycle it. In a lot of cities now, there's places where you can just sort of post that you have something, like maybe you have a dining room table that you can't move. And so you're like, I just want somebody to take it off my hands. Or giving it to like a thrift store that might take it.
Yes.
So that's about just like getting rid of it. But as you say, a lot of times these objects have emotions attached to them. And so we're like, oh, but this was so important to me my first year. And I remember when I got it, and there's a whole memory around it. And so one thing is, if it's small and easy to put on a shelf, maybe you just keep it as a memento for a time, because we do like to hang on to these badges of identity. We like to like memorialize things in things. If it's something like a little clock, well, that's not such a big deal. If it's something like a big chair, then it's like, okay, you don't want to be hauling that thing around for the next 10 years. Another thing you can do is you can take a picture of it, because that'll help you hold on to the memory of it. You'll never forget it if you have a picture of it, but you don't need to hang on to the thing. And it's also, if you're the type of person who hangs on to a lot of things because they have important memories, is to remember that things are more effective at helping us hold on to memories when they're carefully chosen. And so having 3 things that are very full of meaning and that kind of epitomize something, like, oh, this is my first year in Canada.
Yeah,
these 3 things were like my first experience of Canada. That's in a way, a better way to get access to those memories than to have 30 things in a box that you jam into a corner and you never look at. And so if you are interested in hanging on to memories, it's often very helpful to remember that you will do a better job with things when they're carefully curated, when there aren't very many of them. And usually if they're pretty small in size or like easy to put away, because then you can manage them more easily and then they can be displayed more easily, where something that's bigger starts to become more of a hassle.
Yeah.
And then also tends to be stored more. It's stored away, so you don't even see it. So like, what good is it? You have it, but maybe you would actually see it more if it were a photograph or it was like a little thing on a shelf.
That's amazing. And that's why I love it. Like you have given many easy practical examples, like you just mentioned, and there are many hundreds of examples here and practical, right? If I ask, what are the just 3 main things that can help someone to get rid of this stuff? Is there like any checklist? Like do I have any checklist? This book doesn't belong to my checklist. Maybe I should get rid of. Is there anything like that, do you think, or no? Like maybe some other perspectives?
I think a great question to ask yourself is, do I use it? Do I need it? Do I love it? Because there are things that you don't love, but you use them. You're like, oh yeah, I have these thumbtacks. Yeah. There's nothing special about these thumbtacks, but I don't love them, but I use them. Yeah. Then there are the things that you need. Like, let's say every couple of years, it gets cold enough that you need long underwear, or you don't go swimming very often. In Canada, yeah. Yeah, right. Or like, you don't go swimming that often, but every once in a while you do go swimming. And so you have a bathing suit and you think, well, a couple of years go by, but I kind of need that. And the day will come when I'll pull that thing out and I'll be glad I have it. So I need it, even though I'm not really using it very much. I do need it. And then do I love it? Like the clock that reminds me of my first year in the university. It's like, I don't really need it, but I love it. It's full of memories. Yeah. Now, it's easy sometimes to hang on to everything, saying like, well, maybe I'll need it. So you want to be very careful and say like, do you really need it? Or are you just fantasizing that maybe one day you might need it? It has to be something where you're like, no, I actually do need it. And do you love it? It's like, is this something that you really actively love? Because sometimes there are things that we just love. They just make us happy to have them, that are so tied to important memories that, It just,
Even there's no use, you just want that.
you just really want it. And I think sometimes people who talk about minimalism kind of really want to encourage people to get rid of everything. And I just don't think that's how most people want to live. I think we really do project ourselves into our possessions. We use our possessions to remind us of the people and places and activities that we love. And they're important to us, but we want to manage them and not like let them become a burden, a nuisance, an annoyance, a weight on us. I mean, especially if you're younger and you're moving a lot, like you don't want to have a lot of stuff that you're going to have to manage every time you move, that you're going to have to pack and unpack and deal with. It can start, and of course, moving is a great time when people tend to get rid of clutter, but it's a lot easier if you don't accumulate it, because then if you do need to move, it's not such an ordeal. You're like, okay, I can get the boxes and pack this stuff up pretty easily because I know this is all stuff that I either need, use, or love. It's not a bunch of stuff that, I didn't even remember I had this thing. Like, what is this anyway? That makes it really burdensome. It makes it really painful to have to move. And when you're younger, you do tend to move a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you're a student in Canada, like I would say just assumption, like you move at least 3 to 4 homes in 2 years. As an average, that's a lot. Yep. And definitely every time you move, you leave some stuff behind and then you gain some possessions of new stuff. So there's a lot of that. You just mentioned now that some of this stuff has some special emotions behind it. You just love to have it. And in the beginning of our conversation, you said like sometimes we do like to have some stuff around us so we can focus more, right? I just want to ask, like, is there any study out there that shows like you become maybe more productive when you have some outer order surrounding you? Like, is there a study out there like maybe that can that shows that there are some neuron signals going on in our brain, it has some mental or psychologically effect? You think, is that right?
Well, you know what? Different people argue different things because some people say that outer order really like inspires creativity and productivity, and then some people are like, no, messiness. So I really think it's rather than saying like what's generally true, I think it's more helpful to think for each person, well, what's true for me? Like, when do I do my best work? When do I feel most comfortable in a space? Because there's a lot of research pointing in a lot of different directions. And I'm not even sure that it's that useful because individuals are very different from each other. And that's really what most people care about, is they care about their own experience and their own creativity, their own productivity, their own ability to focus. And so I think it's just helpful to say like, okay, well, what do I need? And try to get myself into the environment that works best for me.
Definitely. And all right, let's move on. We know that we need to get rid of some stuff, right? So what would you say, which is best? All right, Harpreet, I'm going to pick a one particular day, Saturday, this weekend, and I'm going to work whole day and clean my basement, clean my bedroom. You think that would be a better idea? Or you think if you have a bigger space, maybe it's better to give 10 minutes every day for next few weeks, and after few weeks you say, okay, are you satisfied or not? Like, which is much more better?
Well, again, I this is an excellent question, but I think it really depends because some people really like to kind of go intense and spend hours and kind of really focus and have like a big result, like before and after, and they do it in one day. Maybe they have a friend come over, they play music, they make it into like a whole thing. But a lot of people are too busy, like they can't really take a whole day like that. Or they're like, if I have a whole day free, the last thing I feel like doing is cleaning. And for them, it's better to do like you say, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. I will say that we tend to overestimate what we can do in a short amount of time, like an afternoon, and underestimate what we can get done if we do a little bit consistently. So if you spent 10 or 15 minutes every day tackling clutter, kind of shelf by shelf, drawer by drawer, pile by pile, you would find that before too long, you would start to see real benefits.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to think like, well, I need to wait until I can take a whole day or it's not worth it. You really can do it a little bit at a time. It's like clutter is one of those things where you can really just spend as much time as you have and make progress slowly. And I will say that one of the things in the book that the most people have said has worked well for them is the 1 minute rule. And this is the idea that if there's anything you can do in less than a minute, you do it without delay. So if you have this piece of paper that you see needs to be filed, you go ahead and file it right away. If you need to print a document, you print it out and put it on your corkboard. If you can hang up your coat, if you can put a piece of recycling in the recycling bin. And what people say over and over is that just doing these tiny little tasks, just kind of during the course of your day, you're not taking any extra time. It's just 1 minute at a time. It really starts to dramatically reduce the clutter in their environment. And so again, if I think some people really do love the intense, kind of longer period. I would never say don't do that if that appeals to you. But for people who don't want to do that, it seems like there are more of those. If you just do a little bit consistently, maybe like you do 10 minutes every day before you leave for work or for school. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to take like 10 minutes, just quickly run around and like, I'm going to do this cabinet, this shelf of the cabinet. Like, what in here do I still use? Is any of this empty? Is any of this expired? Like, does some of this not even belong to me? I don't even know why this thing is here. Let me get rid of it. 10 minutes a day. I mean, what would you have gotten done in a month? You would get a lot done by the end of a month.
Definitely. And I love that, but I always tend to put myself in the former category. Like I love to clean my room like once in a week or maybe once in 5 days or something like that. So I want to ask a very, very important question here. And so when I was doing some research, I was reading articles, right? And doing some studies. So there was one article and it said like clutter can affect your mental health, like feeling stressed, anxious, and depressed. I did one episode with a mental health expert, Sejal Balan, and most part of that episode was on depression, especially on the young students, international students. After that episode, like I have been received many messages, like individually messages saying, thank you, Harpreet, like this was very much needed episode. And I felt like, yeah, this is an issue. Like I personally never had that struggle, that problem in my life, in my college days, but it's been an issue. And a little bit of backstory for these international students, they're coming from another country, from India, Pakistan, in Canada, and we're talking about age 18, age 19. They have to work, they have to manage their school. Many of them have to also think about how they're gonna pay tuition fees, $6,000, $8,000 every 5 months, 6 months, right? So they start becoming victim of depression. Now, you have written this book, but you are also a happiness expert. Please give us an advice for these young minds on how they can bring happiness in their life.
Well, of course, this is an incredibly important issue, and I am not a doctor or therapist, so I want to be sure that to be clear that I'm not saying this as like a trained professional, but from my observation and my study of happiness, one thing I would say, and I would say this especially for students, is you have to like, one really important thing to think about is your body, because your physical experience is always going to color your emotional experience. So something where a lot of students don't get enough sleep, right? Like maybe they have to get up early to work or to go to school, then they're like staying up late with their friends or whatever. Now it's one thing if you have to work and so you're like caught that way, but if you can control your schedule, you really want to make sure that you get at least 7 hours of sleep a night. And one thing that studies show is that people, like we adapt to not getting enough sleep and we think we're fine. Like people will say, oh, I've trained myself to get by on 4 hours. But this is not true. When researchers study these people, they see that they are quite impaired. So if you're a student and what you need to do is to remember, understand, learn, convey, communicate, you are really, not only are you setting yourself up for anxiety and depression by not getting enough sleep, you're also making it harder to do your work well, because that sleep is so important for the kind of high level mental functioning that you want to do. So you really want to get enough sleep. Another thing to think about, and I say this because sometimes students sort of kind of sleep all day and maybe they're up at night if they can be, is light, sunlight. Sunlight is really helpful for just regulating the body. It really like improves mood, it improves energy, it helps people regulate their emotions, especially if you can get early morning light. That's what kind of helps all sorts of systems in the body to stay regulated. So, let's say you're getting up, instead of let's say you keep the blinds down because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't face the day. Like, you really do want to get that light in your face as much as you can. And especially early morning light, if it's possible. Even if you are in a brightly lit indoor room, it is not nearly as much light as you would have on even a very overcast day if you went outside, and that light is just really helpful for the body. And then another thing, and I know this can be really hard for people who are busy if they're running between school and work and just trying to get 7 hours of sleep. Try to just move your body. You do not have to if you don't have like an hour to go for a run, or you can't do a full workout. What research shows is that even like a 20-minute walk a day will dramatically increase your mood, your immune function, your energy, your focus, all the things that you want. All these things help with like helping you not fall into a depression. And so, maybe in your lunch hour, instead of like sitting and eating and like scrolling through your news feed or social media, just like get up and walk around the neighborhood. Like a 20-minute walk a day would really really does have a big effect. So you don't have to think like, well, if I can't work out a lot, it's not worth it. Even a little bit is helpful. And another thing is, to think about what you eat and drink. So one of the reasons people eat unhealthy food is they let themselves get too hungry. So like you skip breakfast, you skip lunch, then you're so hungry, like you're just going to grab some junk food because you're just like, oh my gosh, I got to get something to eat. And if you can, a lot of people like eat deep into the night. And there's a lot of new research that suggests that the body is real. And this is all kind of preliminary, I think, to my mind, but that suggests that the body kind of has like eating mode and not eating mode. And if you're kind of like always eating, maybe you're preventing your body from cycling through that eating, not eating cycle. And so, try to like eat when you're, don't let yourself get too hungry, but at the same time, don't just like keep eating all, every few hours for hours and hours and hours on end. Try to eat dinner and then be done with eating. For a lot of people, that's a rule that can really help with healthy eating, because usually what you're eating at midnight is not, vegetables. You're not eating a salad at midnight. So if you try to say like, after dinner, I'm done eating until the next day, I think for a lot of people that would kind of automatically improve their eating habits overall.
That's so informative. Like I'm sure, like if I'm gonna get any message from this episode, they're gonna talk about this last part we talked about, because this is really an issue like of stress and depression in international students. And you mentioned 4 things they can do, like get a good sleep, 7 hours. When I was in my college and even now, I never get 7 hours sleep. I don't like to get more than 5 to 5.5 hours sleep. So, but I manage my body around that. So I think it's okay. But I really prefer, like if you can get good amount of sleep, it will really help you in your decision making. I totally agree with that. Get more sunlight, move your body, and eat and drink. This again, the sunlight part, I don't know like how they're gonna, because most of us live in basement. We don't get like straight sunlight.
So that's a great point. So maybe you need to make an effort to like, okay, I want to make sure that I step outside and like walk around, do my 20-minute walk in the morning so that I get some of that light to help kind of get me that energy for the day. Because you're right, some of these things, depending on your circumstance, might take a little bit more thought, a little bit more organization. And of course, sometimes they're just not possible. Sometimes things are not possible, but it's good to have it in your mind as something that if you could do, you would do. Yeah, because a lot of times, and I don't want to minimize depression and anxiety by like, if you just got a good night's sleep, it would go away.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I don't want to minimize that, but I do want to say that there are things that we can do that will help kind of give us the wherewithal we need, that can maybe help us not to fall into those situations, or if we do, to try to, soften them, or, make them as, relatively shorter lasting or easier.
Amazing. Like that was such an interesting, informative conversation. And again, like, thank you so much, Gretchen, for coming here. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I was so happy, like, when I saw your email. Thank you so much for that. And again, I'm really appreciate for your time, and thank you so much for being part of the today's episode.
Well, thank you so much. I was so honored to be asked.
Amazing. Thank you.